Hello, everyone, and welcome to my talk. And we're going to be doing one of my favorite activities today, which is speaking languages badly, or as we say in English, butchering them. And I'm going to explain to you why I love butchering languages on Twitter in particular. Okay, so before we start going into the main part of the talk, I'd like to say that butchering a language is a very Anglophone thing to do. So in English, we butcher languages, we speak them badly. In Catalan, yo destrueixo la teva llengua, I destroy your language. In Italian, yo massacro la tua lingua, I massacre your language. In Afrikaans, ik mors je taal op, I mess your language up. And in Ukrainian, ja ruinuju tvoje movie, you ruin it. Okay, so many ways of expressing the same concept. That's part of the beauty of languages, the differences in the idiomatic, expressions. And a great thing as well about Twitter is that, you can kill two birds, with one stone while you're using it. So you can have all the fun that you usually have on Twitter. You can interact with people, you can read their tweets, but you can also exploit it, to learn languages. And you can find all kinds of languages on Twitter. I've, used all these languages on Twitter to various degrees, from reasonably well to terribly. But as I'm going to try to say in this talk, the point is it doesn't matter what your level is. You can exploit Twitter to have fun and learn languages at the same time. So kill two birds with one stone, as we say in English. So today's butchery is going to be about how Twitter is an excellent slaughterhouse in order to butcher languages, or ABBATOIR if you prefer to butcher Romance languages, because that's one of the nice things about the richness of the English language. We have words of Germanic origin like slaughterhouse and words of French origin like abattoir. As I mentioned, there are loads of different languages, and what I really want to do today as well to say thank you to the people who are learning languages on Twitter. There is a language learning community with this hashtag #langtwit. I've learned a lot from them, and by interacting with them, it's fun and it's easy to do this consistently. I mean, that's part of the advantage of social media. It's designed for consistent use. So why not use it consistently to learn languages? And you can read tweets as well, and you can tweet yourself. You can write as well. What I'm also going to be doing today is celebrating imperfect use of language, because I also discovered on Twitter that I love using languages badly. It's a lot of fun to use them badly. So I'm going to practice what I preach in today's talk, and I'm going to speak badly in several languages. Firstly, because you don't have to use language well to make a connection with somebody. So I find that language is often reduced to a vehicle for transmission of information, and that's one of its functions. But another function of language is to, build a relationship with people, to show them that you are interested in them. And even if you speak a language badly, even if you only know one word of a language, you can still make a connection with people, okay? And the other reason I want to speak languages badly is because you have to speak languages badly and often if you want to speak them well. So there's no getting around the butchering. You have to, and if you enjoy the butchery part of language learning, I think you will make, progress more quickly. And so I'll practice what I'll preach. I'll butcher languages in this presentation. Firstly, English, my first language. I don't speak English perfectly, even though it's my first language. So I think, why should I be worried about making mistakes in other language if I can't even get my first language right? And then I'm going to butcher some of the languages that I've learned on Twitter, such as Catalan, Portuguese, Spanish, and Ukrainian. Now, I'm not ready to speak these languages, but I find myself that if I wait until I'm ready, I'm never ready. So I might as well just start using them now and have fun using them badly. Today's disclaimer, I am a language learner, or rather on Twitter, I'm a language butcher. I am not a language coach or language teacher. So this is just my own personal story. It's just my own approach, which works for me personally. I don't want to claim that it is going to help anybody else. I hope that you find some of this useful, but I also realize language learners, one of the things I've learned on Twitter is language learners are so diverse. They have so many different preferences and so many different objectives, what they want to do with their language. And what inspires me is there are so many different people out there on Twitter, learning languages with different strategies, but they all have success with them. So I hope that what I'm going to tell you now will be of some use to you in your own language learning. Okay, so this is my Twitter account. I'm a scientist at a university. I have a research group. I work on biomaterials for tissue regeneration. I also lecture in chemical engineering, and I help students who want to study abroad. And I find that my two passions, science and languages, can be combined and they complement each other, because the more languages the more collaborations you can build up with people from different countries, and the more scientific results you get. So it's good, languages are good for science. Equally, in a scientific career, because you can work together with people from so many countries, you have great opportunities to learn and apply knowledge of language as well. So you could not just by collaboration, you can also go to conferences, you can correspond with people. People think often of people talk about a fork in the road, because that people either do languages or science. But I'm trying to persuade people, no, it's completely the opposite. You can do both, and you can do both better by doing both science and languages at once. But coming back to language butchery on Twitter. So I'm British and I speak English as my first language, not perfectly. I mean, I don't think anyone speaks their first language perfectly. I can speak Dutch, German, Polish, and Russian well, and I can have a conversation in Czech, French, and Italian. And there are many languages that I speak to badly and which I've butchered on Twitter to various degrees. So I can say things in Catalan and Portuguese, Ukrainian, and Spanish. In Romanian, I'm not so good. In Chinese or Hindi, it's difficult for me to build a sentence. But the experience of using them on Twitter has been beneficial to me. All of them have been useful to me at some point in my life. Okay, so one thing that a lot of language learners agree on is that consistency helps us to make progress. So these are two guys I admire on Twitter. So Laid Back Languages says, if you want to learn a language but you don't know where to start, just focus on doing something every day. So you build the habit of doing something for a short period every day. Okay. And another person who I like a lot, Mark from Language Come Up, he has a great, passion for languages. He writes here, we have so many windows during the day of 10 or 15 minutes, which we can exploit, to learn languages. And, if you have a short window of the day, 10, 15 minutes, why not use that time to write a tweet or two, or to read a tweet or two? Okay. And social media is designed for everyday use, for consistent use. So why not exploit it to learn languages often? So another person who makes great quotes on Twitter is Ace Buck, who learns Chinese, French, and Spanish. And he says, if you arrange it so your everyday activities are taking place in the languages you're learning, then you're guaranteed to practice whether or not you actively set aside time for studying languages. And he's right. And he also writes here that social media creates bubbles for groups, and he comes onto Twitter to get great language learning content. That's also one reason why I like being on Twitter, so I can profit from the insights of the people who come there. Okay, so I try to avoid giving people advice when it comes to language learning, because people are so different. If I was to give one piece of advice, however, it would be, what's the best method to learn language? And I would regurgitate the advice of this man who says the best method is the method you'll stick with. And he's right. And I find that Twitter is very easy to stick with because it's interactive. So I personally want to learn languages primarily in order to interact with people, okay? And why not, therefore, learn languages in an interactive way? So I'm, again, killing two birds with one stone. I'm learning languages and doing something I like, which is interacting. And also, you only have to write short messages on Twitter. I mean, you can write threads if you want, but, writing a short message is something that's very easy to do when you have a short window, during the day. Okay, so people talk about 4 fundamental skills, in language learning, such as reading, listening, writing, and speaking. Now, to be honest, I think that there are many, many more skills in language learning which are not talked about so much. Okay, so I think that there are, some examples would be, how some people are, have an unwillingness, to speak. Maybe they feel a bit inhibited. Some people encounter people who answer all the time in English as well. I mean, these are all extra skills which are not really talked about in typical sort of, language teaching. However, before I distract myself, I'd like to point out that Twitter is a good place to practice your reading. Okay, so people talk about developing a reading habit. So, Ollie Richards, a very famous polyglot, has a sort of story learning method where you read and you enjoy your reading, and then it's extensive reading. So you're primarily reading and you're picking up the language, you're assimilating it while you're reading. And I think that's a great method. I also think it's a great method to do to read people's tweets. Again, you're doing extensive reading, you're enjoying, the tweets that these people are publishing, and it's like a newspaper in a way. You get a new edition daily. Okay, so this man is somebody who I admire a lot. He tweets a lot in Ukrainian, which I'm learning, and also because Twitter is interactive, you can actually tweet, with the author of the tweets, so you can have some fun that way, and that's an advantage using Twitter than reading a book. So I think it's easy to develop a habit this way. Okay, so also, tweets are good, short, comprehensible input. Okay, so this is another person who I admire who writes a lot, in Catalan. And if you don't understand something that's written, you can also, use, Google sort of Translate as well, because there's a Google Translate button, and that can actually help if you don't understand something, to give you an idea of what was said. And again, because it's short, usually it's easy to understand, and it's done regularly as well. So you are doing it consistently. You're reading other people's tweets consistently. Okay, now personally, I think that tweeting also deserves or writing short messages deserves a category of its own, between speaking and writing, because it has similarities to both, but it's also a bit different. So one of the advantages of tweeting in comparison to writing, longer pieces of text, is that it's shorter, and so it's easier to do consistently. I think a challenge that many of us have is basically to find, time, to dedicate to language learning, and anything that's short but is regular, that causes us to do a bit of language learning instead of none at all, is good. Tweeting is easier than speaking because it's not so spontaneous. So there's less pressure. Okay, you don't feel under so much immediate pressure when you're writing a tweet. And also, you're not just communicating to one person. Many people can read, the tweet because it's public. And so, you can get, advice from other people. Other people can, as we say in English, chip in, to give you, to make suggestions. And on Twitter, there are many sources of inspiration. There are lots of interesting people. It's not hard to find something to tweet about, or to notice something positive that another language learner is doing, and comment on that positively. You can. Why not try to improve somebody's mood if you can? Okay, so my inspiration for starting to write tweets in many languages was this user here, Kate, who tweets in English, but also in Spanish, and also in Portuguese, and also in Catalan. And I thought, that's a nice way of practicing your languages. And why I started to use languages badly on Twitter, it was actually inspired by a joke made by Lindy Bottas, and the famous polyglot. And she said that she bought an iPad and accidentally selected Romanian as the interface language. And then she said, "Oh, I think it's time to learn Romanian." Yeah. And it was meant as a joke, but I thought to myself, Romanian? Well, why not? I know people from Romania. I haven't tried, to learn a language from scratch, as a beginner for a long time. I think it's a good thing to do, because you feel, like a baby again. You feel powerless, as if you can't, build. Often you find it difficult to build a sentence. You don't know how to say anything. So I thought to myself, right, let's do an experiment. And so I decided to try to tweet in Romanian, so every day, to see how much progress I would make. And I thought to myself, well, because tweets are short, it shouldn't be too much effort every day, too much time. And Twitter is interactive. It might be a fun thing to do. So let's just see how far I get. I wasn't taking it very seriously at the start. I was just doing it for fun. But so, to be honest, silliness is also something that motivates me. I mean, if I'm doing something for fun or for frivolity, that actually helps me in my language learning. So why not sort of do frivolous things if I'm going to do them regularly, and if it's going to make me make progress, in my language learning? Okay, so anyway, I started butchering Romanian, and it was good fun. I was able to interact with others, and that made me want to continue. And that's one of the advantages of social media. It's interactive. Okay, then I then started, to write messages about other people in the language learning community, because there are so many people doing learning interesting languages and doing interesting things. And so I thought, well, let's just if I need something to tweet about, just find somebody who's doing something, interesting, and most people are doing something interesting, and just write something nice about them to get, some daily practice in. And so, yeah, it's nice when you feel that, you've practiced your language, and also you've done something to improve, somebody's mood as well. So you're not just practicing just for the sake of practicing, but there is an extra, positive outcome, from that. Okay. And as I mentioned before, Twitter is, interactive. Many people can look at it. So this user, Lalin Gold, very kindly, commented on what I wrote in order to make some suggestions about how I could improve. Okay, and this is why it's all about practicing, really. And if you want to get better, you have to practice. And I'm also very open to corrections as well. Okay, so, and you may be asking, well, what if you tweet about somebody in a language that they don't understand? Well, thanks to Google Translate, it doesn't matter so much if they don't understand the language, because they can still get an idea of what you were tweeting about. Okay, so I mean, I love using language, no matter how badly I speak, and this is something that I discovered on Twitter. Here you have a translation from Romanian, and this is into Dutch, because I took it, from my account, which is in Dutch. Now, the translation is not perfect by any means, but it's good enough so that the reader can understand as well. And so I think to myself, it's better to tweet about somebody in a language they don't understand, but for which they can use Google Translate, than not to tweet anything positive about them, at all. Okay. Okay, and another thing that I found was that these sort of automatic translations are excellent teachers for me, because they are very patient. They have unlimited patience. Okay, and I found them useful because as a beginner, sometimes you're not sure, how would I build a sentence? And if you put in a sentence in a language you know well, then you get a sentence in the language that you're learning. Now, I know that automatic translators have a lot of shortcomings, and that you should not rely completely on the translation. So what I do is I only use the translation if I can more or less understand, the structure of the sentence. Okay, so this is what, but I think that's what I like about it. It, despite their shortcomings, as translators, they can still give you an idea about how to build a sentence. And at this stage, we're not at doing perfect translations with great accuracy. We're still at the butchery stage. We're still just learning to produce a sentence as well. So I think that for the purposes of somebody like me at a low level, they still have their use. I think it's unfortunate that automatic translators are often marketed as tools so that you don't have to think about what you put and you get something out, or they're thought of as being substitutes for language learning. But I think they should be used as aids to language learning. So in the same way as a calculator can actually be useful in helping you to learn maths, a automatic translator can be helpful in helping you to learn a language. Okay. So now I'll destroy some Catalan. Okay, so m'agrada molt aprender el català, e jo he començat a aprender el català perché jo conec moltes persones molt agradables en Twitter, e quan jo he començat a aprendre el català, jo he rebut una reacció molt positiva, e jo crec personalment que les llengües menys populares són més poderosos perquè podem fer un connexió més forta amb els parlantes. Per exemple, els catalanoparlantes reagissin més positivament que quan jo parlo català, com els hispanoparlants quan jo parlo espanyol. E no hemos parlar una llengua bé, per fer aquesta connexió amb la gent. M'agrada Kato Lomb, que Kato Lomb ha dit, hemos de aprender les llengües perquè les llengües són l'única cosa que val la pena a aprendre també malament. Les frases amb intencions bonics que contenen moltes errores poden construir ponts entre personas. Okay? E Kato Lomb tenia raó, e jo vull mostrar un exemple de la destrucció del català en Twitter. So, aquesta noia catalana ha fet un vídeo, e eu tenia ganas a ver aquest video e in inglés quan tens ganas pots also dir I'm excited to so jo escrit o ja estic excitat pero esta significa algo con una altra significativo en català. So, pero se no se no no hemos parlar una lengua perfectamente e independentment del la teva nivell, se also tu tens un'opportunitat per utilizzarlo, has de utilizzarlo e fer errors es una parte vital de l'aprenentatge dos idiomas. Okay? E fen i desfen l'appren apprenen. So, okay, so that was my attempt to speak Catalan. So now let's butcher Portuguese. So, porque eu decidi aprender português? Well, foi uma brincadeira, porque eu also organizei also uma conferência sobre las also, idiomas no ciência, also, e eu queria mostrar que a ciência e os idiomas são conectados. E algumas also, pessoas luso falantes also, que falam also, português han also, participado e como brincadeira eu pensava por que não aprender o português em 22 dias para eles. So, obviamente, não é also, possível aprender o idioma em 22 dias, pero eu gosto da also, estupidità da situação e eu also, tinha muita motivação also, para aprender e por essa razão eu comecei a aprender e a casa eu also, tinha 2 livros para aprender o português e eu comprei also, eles muitos anos, also, há muitos anos, mas eu não utilizei eles also, also nunca. So eu comecei a utilizar os livros para aprender pouco da gramática also, portuguesa e imediatamente eu comecei a utilizar o português para escrever algumas also, tweets. E eu also, recebi also, comentário não entendi ser irônico ou de verdade. Não é possível que alguém escreva neste nível ao primeiro dia e ninguém ensinaria o português assim, ok? E eu queria explicar por que é possível construir algumas frases em português e quebrar o português imediatamente. É a magia dos idiomas parecidos. So, Richard Simcott, o poliglota muito famosa, diz que o aprendizagem dos idiomas parecidos é o aprendizagem das semelhanças. E não é, não estamos aprendendo coisas que são fundamentalmente novos. E per essa razão é possível já ao primeiro dia construir frases em português, ok? E eu quero enfatizar que eu estou escrevendo a Twitter como exercício para praticar, não para fazer uma performance, okay? Okay, and so that was awful Portuguese, and then now let's butcher some Spanish. So eu sinceramente eu fui surpreso que eu empecé a aprender espanhol porque generalmente eu prefiro aprender los idiomas menos populares, como por ejemplo el catalán, porque yo creo que los idiomas menos populares son más poderosos para hacer una conexión con la gente. Y para mí, el español era popular y por eso, porque yo comencé a aprender o a destrozar el castellano. Y yo soy profesor de ingeniería química, ¿ok? Y yo he preguntado a mis estudiantes en mi grupo cuáles idiomas vosotros habléis. Y pues yo pregunté cuál idioma de vosotros debo yo aprender para os, y vosotros podéis votar, y la opción la más popular fue español, ¿ok? So, y por eso yo comencé a aprender español, y me gusta aprender eso idioma, pero ¿por qué yo he hecho esta pregunta a mis alumnos? ¿por qué aprender un idioma dos alumnos? Well, las universidades teóricamente son muy internacional y hay muchos alumnos de muchos países diversos. Y yo creo que yo como profesor, yo debo mostrar interés, curiosidad a las competencias lingüísticas de mis alumnos. Y yo espero que ellos vayan a aprender los idiomas de sus colegas de trabajo, en futuro, y también de sus clientes. Y por eso yo quiero hacer un ejemplo positivo. Si yo estoy aprendiendo vuestros idiomas, yo espero que vosotros vayáis a aprender otros idiomas. Yo espero que un alumno al menos sea más motivado a aprender una lengua y un idioma, y también que un alumno en el grupo se siente más apreciado porque yo estoy aprendiendo su idioma. Okay, so that was Spanish. Now it's time to butcher some Ukrainian. Я почав вивчати українську мову, коли війна в Україні розпочалася. Я хочу підтримати українську культуру, і я вже знаю російською мовою і польською мовою. І тому у мене була мотивація. І також я думав, можливо, що я зможу допомагати біженцям, і зараз я займаюсь перекладами медичних документів для біженців українців. So, я дуже радий, що я можу трохи допомагати завдяки тому, що я почав вивчати українську мову. І як можливо, що я можу руйнувати українську мову так швидко? Це магія мов слов'янських, що якщо знаєш польську і російську, українська мова тобі не здається так іноземно, і вже зможеш побудувати фрази і вирази, і використовувати мову швидко. І я хочу розповідати про ту людину в Твіттері. Він для мене велике надихання, тому що він так прекрасно пише українською мовою. Він британець, він працює як вчитель англійської мови в Україні, але також щоденно українською мовою пише в Твіттер, і в майбутньому ja би хотів писати і розмовляти українською так гарно, як він. So, дуже дякую. So, thank you for sticking to the end. To sum up, Twitter's advantage for me is that it helps me to practice a language consistently, reading and tweeting, short messages in different languages. Okay. Languages help you and others to enjoy Twitter. I love the people on Twitter. It's more fun for you. You can appreciate the others. So many people there who are great, who all have something to offer. Okay. And again, thanks to everybody who I met on Twitter. I could only mention a few people in this talk, but there were so many more people who deserve to be mentioned. Again, thank you for your attention. Now, I see there were some questions. Okay. You may write to me in any language of your choice, and I will try to respond in the same language. Okay. Thank you very much. I see there are some questions here. So the first one is in English. Any tips how to deal with people on Twitter who don't appreciate the butchery or take it too seriously? Right. Well, I mean, if you tweet about somebody, and in my experience, 75% of people who I tweet about, respond positively. There are some people who don't respond. Maybe they have no time, or maybe they don't understand what I'm doing. That's okay. You don't have to tweet about them again. Some other people might not take it seriously or might not like it. I mean, they don't have to. That's their choice. But again, we're not using languages for the people who don't appreciate it. We're using language for the people who do. I mean, similarly, we're, tweeting for the people who do want to read our tweets, not for the people who don't want to read our tweets. Another question, what kind of hashtags would you suggest to a butcher beginner for a bigger audience? Yes, well, I mean, it depends. Personally, I've never really wanted to have a bigger audience. I've only really wanted mainly to tweet in response to one person, to appreciate that person. I would suggest the lang tweet hashtag to get into contact with other language learners. So hashtag LANGTWT. That's what I can suggest. Thank you. Another question. Now, I think I'll have to butcher some Spanish. Una pregunta para Tim. ¿Cuándo comienzo a aprender portugués en 22 ya sabía castellano? No, castellano fue el último miembro de la familia de los idiomas románicos que yo he aprendido. So, yo comencé con francés y italiano, pues, y pues después de italiano, rumeno y catalán y portugués, y la última fui español, castellano. So, pero gracias al portugués, el castellano fue más fácil. Okay. Now one in Catalan, excellent. Has tu pensat de veure els teus tweets vells per a comprendre com molt has progressat? Well, es possible que yo comprendo que yo no he progressat. És també possible. Sincerament, jo no he pensat a veure els meus tweets vells, però és una idea molt bon, e moltes gràcies per la teva suggerimento. No, yo no parlo el català molt bé. Okay. Any more questions? Más preguntas? That's it. Well, thank you very much for your attention. I hope that some of it was useful, and I hope you have fun, as much fun butchering languages, whatever language, as I do, not just on Twitter, but also here at the Polyglot Gathering. So many thanks.